God of War Ragnarok is a single-player action-adventure game with hacking, slashing, and a few RPG elements. I spent 50 hours on this game on normal mode, and I will say I enjoyed my time. This game builds off of the 2018 God of War, and because this is a sequel to that game, I won't go into too much detail on how this game differs itself from the Greek series, as that will be for when I review the 2018 game at some point. I may have only beat this Norse Duology, but I think this series has had combat as its main focus. Very early in this game, you get the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos. The axe is an ice-based weapon and the blades are fire-based. If you were to ask me which ones to use, I would say use the axe for enemies weak against ice and the blades for enemies weak against fire. The combat is basically brute force as well as read and react. When playing offense, you will definitely be mashing the attack buttons as well as pulling off combos, but you are going to have to play defensively too if you are to succeed in this game. Do you see how this circle is focused and shrinking on this enemy? That is a visual cue on what defensive action you should take. Red means the attack is unblockable and must dodge. Blue means that you need to attack the enemy with your shield to knock him off balance. Yellow, you pull out your shield at just the right time and the enemy could be knocked off balance for you to counterattack. Mistime it, however, and your enemy would have a head start on attacking you, although with some enemies, the game will let you dodge the attack at just the last frame before the enemy lands a hit. You also have a sidekick when playing as well. With Kratos, he would either have Atreus or Freya fire off arrows with the push of the square button. The game was not easy, and I died quite a bit when I played on normal mode, but the combat was fun because the game provides a challenge based on the mechanics I mentioned just a second ago and manages to have ways that prevent the game from being too repetitive. Enemies do come up and attack you from behind as indicated by arrows here. How the game keeps itself from being too repetitive? Oh man, let's talk about the boss fights as they are fantastic. I mentioned a couple of boss fights in part 1 of this review describing that they were awesome, so let's talk about a few examples. You fight Thor early in the game and I enjoy this fight because come on, you're fighting Thor and it sets the stage for what's to come. I may be beating him at this moment, but then the next he's fighting back and that's where defensive play comes in and you will take damage if you attack him while he's attacking. Now the Needhog. I may be brute forcing my way at this moment right here, but look, he's using a tail to shoot a laser beam, so I would have to avoid being hit by that. By this point in the game, you would have sigil arrows. I love the sigil arrows that Atreus and Freya can use as they amplify your attacks, and it's welcoming to me that this boss fight has you use them. There's also this flame phantom here in an optional side quest where you attack its core, but how he loses its health is when you stun it and attack the pillars tied to his life force. Although my issue with this fight is that you fight bosses a little too similar to this in mandatory parts of the story more than once, so you would have a repeating boss fight here, which is what I am not a fan of. Heimdall is a love to hate kind of character. You do acquire a spear as a third weapon. Heimdall is a god who can see what your next attack is going to be. See how he's dodging all of Kratos' punches? Here's where the spear comes into play. You get unlimited spears to throw, even if it's a few at a time. Heimdall is blocking these spears, but then look, the spears work like a bomb that explodes with the press of a button on a remote control, and if you blow the spear where Heimdall is standing, you can knock him off balance and attack. The spear is a melee weapon too, of course. There is a little more to this fight as he starts on a mount, but I'm just going to give a basic gist on what the spear is used for. Now let's talk about sidekicks. Again, when you're playing as Kratos, you're either teaming up with Atreus or Freya, and they both use arrows. Sonic arrows are basically an upgraded version of the normal arrows, but what really stands out to me are the sigil arrows, which amplify Kratos' attacks with his weapons. In puzzles, you fire several sigil arrows close to one another, leading to the thing you want to blow up, and when you throw your icy axe or extend your fiery blades, it creates this domino effect where the fire or ice follows a path set by where you have your companion fire the sigil arrows. You do play as Atreus at some parts in the story, and I do enjoy playing as Atreus. The thing is, Kratos is still the character you play by default, and you only swap to Atreus when the story calls for it. The Jotunheim section with Atreus did feel a little long in my opinion. I don't find Atreus to feel mechanically different from Kratos, as the controls for attacking and stuff are still the same. Although I would like Atreus' gameplay expanded upon, as well as his relationships with Angerboda and Thrud expanded upon in like a Miles Morales-esque sequel, which probably may not happen, and maybe I'm the only one who thinks that's a good idea, who knows. The game doesn't just have combat, it has exploration with quests too. The game is not open world, it's linear so the game could tell its story, but you are allowed to branch off the path and do a side quest or explore, which exploring rewards you for your curiosity as you come across treasure chests. I did not 100% complete this game, as it takes a certain amount of interest for me to do everything in a game, but some side quests are worth doing. To just talk about a few, I really enjoyed this side quest where you freed this out of water flying jellyfish, as look at this, the use of blue is beautiful. Also, the conversations between Kratos, Mimir, and Atreus is great too, as Kratos probably could not care less about the jellyfish, but being the animal lover Atreus is, I really like how Kratos does this to spend time with his son. It makes doing this quest a big wholesome moment. There is also a new area that you unlock in Vanaheim that take you out of the forest and into a desert-like area where you fight a dragon and doing certain activities here that would allow you to craft the dragon-scaled armor. Is that the best armor? Probably not, but it looks cool and does its job. From what I've done though, the optional area in Vanaheim is the only time from what I recall that leads you into an area that mixes up the scenery, whereas if you explore the scenery in other realms, you would still see the same scenery. I wish there were more optional areas like the non-forested Vanaheim area. Odin's ravens, I really just take care of them when I see them. Niflheim offers rewards for killing some of them, but I did not complete this quest, as Ocarina of Time has a similar side quest that I will talk about when I review that game. There are also puzzles in this game. I do like puzzles, although I wish the hint system was handled like Uncharted, where if you don't figure out the puzzle in a certain amount of time, it would offer you a hint via button prompt. This game, while I do love the conversations between all of the characters, I am not a fan of how they give you hints without your input, and it does not take long for them to talk. I remember trying to change this one setting. I don't remember what it was, nor do I remember if it did anything to make the characters be quiet in puzzles. Lastly, for the gameplay, I will talk about the RPG elements. Hard mode or higher, you may have to pay attention to some of the more RPG-like variables, but in normal mode, based on my experience, I really think you can just focus on getting better armor and improving the weapons you have. I would say you would have an advantage in the game if you do some of the optional content, but I would not say the game gets too much easier, as combat is more about skills and not statistics, I would say. First of all, what can I say? The graphics are amazing. I remember how good the graphics were when I played Metal Gear Solid 4 on the PS3 and thinking, how could these graphics get better? I am having that same question here, even though I know by now that graphics always improves as technology evolves. Not to mention at a smooth 60 frames per second. When I played this day one, I did see a couple times where clothing clipped through the characters, but it was super minor. I think the day one patch fixed it. Before the patch though, the game felt plenty polished, which convinces me they really wanted to make sure this game was completed before release. I was concerned that this game would have too much snow, but the environments get mixed up quite a bit. There is a lot of snow, mind you, as Midgard is now frozen. Niflheim is a frozen world already. The hell in Norse mythology is really cold as opposed to really hot. Graphics do not always make a game, but there is clear attention to detail here. Voice acting, stellar. No complaints. Everyone nails their roles. Sound effects, pretty good. Music, Well, this is kind of disagreeable, but is no music in certain environments a preference for some people? I grew up playing video games where music is played constantly, so comment below and educate me on what you think of music being environmental sounds as opposed to music with instruments. There are a few pieces I remember. I did play this with surround sound, and I was able to soak in some of the music with my back speakers, but with stereo or mono, the music is not quite so prominent. I admit this is disagreeable, and maybe that is just me.
There is absolutely no denying that whether or not you enjoy this Norse duology, that these games are well made.
The graphics, which is probably the first thing you'll see, are really impressive. I did not encounter any glitches in my playthrough, nor did I come across any frame rate stutters, so the game functions really well. This game is well acted, the game works from a technical standpoint, the gameplay is fun from a gameplay standpoint. The story, the visuals, the characters, etc. are inspiring from an artistic standpoint. I could almost give this game a 10 out of 10, but I am going to give it a 9.5. Story-wise, the father-son relationship is well written, but I would have preferred if Odin was handled a little differently as a villain, even though he is great as a character. The gameplay, you will need to enjoy both of the story and game to get the most out of this game, and which I did. I could not find that many complaints about the gameplay. I appreciated the side content. I really encouraged doing some of the side content, although for me I did not 100% the game as I am not a completionist. I am mainly a main story plus some extras kind of guy. There were still a few repeating bosses like how I remember the 2018 game having. The game I think is capable of a 10 out of 10, but that is something I need time to digest, and not to mention God of War 2018 is not my favorite game on the PS4. Persona 5 Royal is my favorite PS4 game. Final Fantasy VII Remake is my second favorite PS4 game. Spider-Man I think is my third favorite, but the 2018 game might be my fourth favorite, maybe. As far as PS5 games, I'll have to see how the PS5 library pans out in later years, but it looks like this game will be in my top 5 favorite PS5 games, just not my number 1, if that makes sense.
Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. With that being said, take care.